570s, the Turkic Khaganate had become a noticeable phenomenon in the world political stage at that time, and Byzantium, Sassanid Iran and China had to reckon with it. What was the fate of the Turkic states on the political map of the world? And how did it influence on the modern Turkic peoples? You will learn about it in the next series of documentary historical program, Military Arts of the Great Steppe, the Turkic World. From you, prudent people will come, scribes and prophets, tsars and khans. Great Tengri. The oldest states in the territory of Central Asia emerged in ancient times. In general, they were very small. The most famous of them are Sogdiana, Fergana, Ustrushana, Bukhara, Merv, Khoresm and Bactria. Their political history is practically unknown. In the 6th century BC, all of them were conquered by the Persians. Then, Central Asia was sequentially a part of states of Alexander the Great, Seleucids, Greco-Bactrian, Parthian and Sassanids. In 550-560, the Turkic Khaganate finally strengthened its domination in Central Asia and southern Siberia, subjecting Khitan and Kyrgyz tribes. Kingdoms of northern China paid tribute to the Turks. In 563-565, the Persians and the Turks, with joint efforts, destroyed Hethylite state in Central Asia, and its lands were divided by the winners. As a result, by 570s, the Turkic Khaganate had become a noticeable phenomenon in the world political stage at that time, and Byzantium, Sassanid Iran and China had to reckon with it. By that time, the Turkic Khaganate, which expanded on the vast territory, was a motley conglomerate of ethnopolitical formations controlled by almost independent khans, although they were related to each other. In 581, a bloody strife started inside the Rudin clan. As a result of this crisis, the Khaganate was split into two independent and mutually hostile parts: the Eastern Khaganate, from Altai to the Great Wall of China, and the Western Khaganate, from Altai to Crimea. After another half-century, the Western Turkic Khaganate ceased to exist. The Western Turkic Khaganate, on its scale, perhaps was more extensive and not isolated. In the Eastern Khaganate, geographically, was the famous White Dragon Desert, Taklamakan, as it was called at that time. It made some geographic limitations. Tian Shan Mountains also made some limitations. If we talk about the Western Turkic Khaganate, there were Karatau Mountains that extended to the Sirdarya region, present-day South Kazakhstan, then to the Sirdarya, Amudarya. Further and further, Turkic culture spread, purely Turkic rule spread. It was much larger, so August Turks came to Asia Minor, became the Seljuks and then the Ottomans. And in the eastern direction there were limitations, and so, on the one hand, they were various, and on the other hand, they were interconnected. But Western Turks, at an early stage, were able to create their own culture, to establish their genealogy, their traditions, and to prove that they also had the right to legitimate power. Peoples don't fall from the sky and don't disappear through the ground. Nikolai Karamzin. The Western Khaganate occupied Central Asian and more Western lands. It achieved its power during the reign of above-mentioned Dato Kagan. But soon, independent Khazar Kaganate was formed in the Caspian and the North Caucasian steppes, and the Turkic Kaganate lost its most important possessions in Eastern Europe. Another intervention of China and invasion of new tribes from the north led to the fall of this state in 740. The Eastern Kaganate had to defend itself against China ever more, due to large extent of the common borders. The Kaganate several times in the late 7th century, in the 30s of 8th century, in major battles was able to defend its independence and won a splendid victory over its southern neighbor. However, in 745, the Eastern Turkic Kaganate ceased to exist after defeat in the battle against troops of Uighur Khan Muyunchu. On the mainlands of the Eastern Kaganate emerged Uighur Kaganate, one of the early medieval Turkic states. The Kazakh Kaganate, mid-8th-10th centuries, was founded by the ancient Tatars who went to the west after fall of the Eastern Turkic Kaganate. The new state occupied the territory in the basin of the Irtysh River and up to the Ural Mountains on the west. The main populations were the Kimaks related to the Tatars. They lived in the eastern lands of the Kaganate. Lands near the Urals belonged to the Kipchaks, who were considered the western branch of the Kimaks. Imakia town on the Irtysh was the capital of the state. The population was basically pagan. They professed Tengriism, worship of the sky, as many of the early Turks. They worshipped the sun and stars and were engaged in astrology. Some part of Kimak society adopted Manichaeism, religious teaching widespread in Iran, Central Asia and India since the 3rd century, and later, since the 8th century, adopted Islam. This was a powerful country in the territory of present-day central Kazakhstan with the Kimaks. It was a following wave of Turkic-speaking tribes after the Karluks. The second wave of resettlement of the Turks began with the Karluks. The Kimaks partially formed a part of Karluk Kaganate. There was a population explosion. Number of people increased. They formed a separate country, within which there was Kipchak's powerful union, and it subsequently conquered the territory of Kimak Kaganate. But this was preceded by a rather long history of the Kimaks. There were very many events in relationship with their neighbors, with Aguzes, neighboring countries, etc. And the most important thing is that they made a substantial ethnic component of the Kazakh ethnic group. That is, they were a part of Kipchak component, and then a part of the future Kazakh ethnos. The population of Kimak state consisted of 7 tribes. Among them, Kimaks and Kipchaks were the most famous and powerful. Persian historian Gardizi, 11th century. The Kazakh Kaganate 650-965 was founded by the Turkic-speaking Khazars, who had come to Eastern Europe as a part of the Huns. At first, the Kaganate occupied the northern Caucasus and the Caspian steppes, and during the time, its domination spread on the northern Black Sea region up to the Crimea, and in the north up to Volga, Bulgaria and Russian principalities. In the beginning, Rus paid tribute to the Khazars, and its first princes had the title Hakan, Kahan. Khazarian population, besides the Khazars, consisted of Bulgars, Savars, Basils, Balanjars, whose languages were similar to Khazars. Samandar town in Dagestan was the capital of the state in the 7th century. Since the early 8th century, it was transferred to Itil town in the lower reaches of the Volga, which became the largest center of big transit trade between east and west at that time. The Khazars began to engage in agriculture, vine growing and capture fishing. There arose rich Saltovo-Mayaki culture, which clearly reflected the transition of the society from nomadic life to towns. Kagan, his entourage and generally the top accepted Judaism. Who are the Hungarians? They are the Uighurs who once became powerful nomadic tribal unions led with their Turkic nobility. That is, they were fishermen, hunters, and the Turks turned them into horse soldiers. And when there was a need for their economy, when their herds demanded access to the steppe, they came out. They were already organized. They knew that in the steppe they wouldn't die. They were strong enough, and only in this case they came out into the steppe. However, the Pechenegs forced them out, pushed them into the southern Russian steppes, where they were subordinated to Kazakh tribes. At that time, Kazakh kaganate was disintegrated, and the 7 Hungarian tribes joined together, headed by 3 Khazar Turkic tribes, and went to the territory of Ponon, and in 1000 they created the Hungarian kingdom. The fall of the Kazakh Khaganate generated several waves of migration, which formed the basic core of Eastern European population professing Judaism. Arthur Koestler. The Uighurs came to power in the name of the clan leader Bilge of Yaglakar clan, and year of 745 can be considered the year of founding the Uighur Khaganate. They built their power on different principles than the Turks did. 10 clans formed Tuguz Oghuz tribe, which was leading but not dominating. The Uighurs subjected Basmals and Karluks and took them in their own environment as equals. 6 Tile tribes, Butu, Han, Tayurku, Tongra, Siche and Kibi, were equal to the Tuguz Oghuzes in rights and duties. Khan's headquarters was between the Khangai and the Orkhon. In the east, the borders covered the western Manchuria, in the west Jangaria. After defeat of the Karluks, the eastern nomad territory in the Black Irtish became part of the Uighur Khaganate. The Uighurs didn't seek territorial aggrandizement. They were tired of turmoil.
Но уйгуры не стремились к экспансии. Они уже к тому времени устали от потрясений.
Kagan, Manchur formed a mobile, well-trained army. Arab historian Kujama wrote that 10 Uighurs could win 100 Karluks. Manchur, with his usual energy, improved his empire. In spring of 750, he defeated the Chiks in the upper Yenisei, in autumn the Tatars in the northwest of Manchuria, in the following year the Kyrgyzs in the northwest. At that, some representatives of the defeated tribes joined the Uighurs, and they called them guests. The Kyrgyzs, who bordered with the Uighur Khaganate in the north, opposed up to 758. Even though they were defeated and submitted, paying sable tribute to the Uighurs, they didn't lose their self-government. The Pechenegs didn't allow the Uighurs to expand the western borders. The Pechenegs' nomad territory had spread to the lower Volga at this time.
Политическими факторами, скажем, или другими факторами были...
Eastern Turkestan oases were political factors or other factors. It is very well traced on the basis of Uighur chronic memorials that describe military campaigns. And through the military campaigns, Beshbalik and the other East Turkestan oases were important for Uighur conquests during that time. And we have a lot of descriptions, a lot of the details of how Uighur Khagans fought for establishing their domination in that area. Later we see competing interests of Tibet and Uighur Kaganate in Beshbalik. In the end, the Uighurs were resettled, and a large part of Uighur tribes, after the fall of the Uighur Kaganate, went to the territory of Eastern Turkestan oasis.
Именно на территорию, скажем, оазисов Восточного Туркестана.
In 789, Uiguria became an elective monarchy, and in fact it turned out that the Uyghurs didn't depend on the Chinese, but the Chinese depended on the Uyghurs. The Turks' empire, great civilization. In the 8th century, in writings of authors of different languages, there appeared the name of the tribe named in Rus Polovtsi, in Central Europe Kumans, and in the East Kipchaks. Muslim historians and Russian chroniclers know Kipchak-Polovtsi tribe as numerous and strong tribe, and the whole Great Steppe was called by its name. At first, ethnonym Kipchak was recorded on the Selenga stone in 759. In the 8th-10th centuries, domination of the Kimeks and the Kipchaks, first in the Altai, in the Irtysh area and eastern Kazakhstan, became the determining factor in this vast steppe region. In addition, some groups of Kipchaks were also known in Fergana, East Turkestan and Kashgaria. According to academician Manash Kazabayev, this period was the time of separation of ethnic groups from the Turkic tribes. With regard to the Kazakh history, this period is called Oghuz Kipchak era. In the 10th century, process of ethnic separation began from a variety of tribal unions of the Slavs, the Roman Germanic, the Turks and others, resettled the Eurasian space. Thus, Russian people arose in the West. According to the above-mentioned author, Kipchak people was formed in the Great Steppe at that time.
Впервые имя Кыпчак, Кубучак,
For the first time, the name Kipchak, Kubuchak, was used early in the 8th century, in 715, I think, in the Selenga stone. There are words of the Uighur ruler who wrote, "When Turks and Kipchaks ruled over us for 50 years." Historians began to seek. They began to study carefully all written records of the previous period. But the name Kipchak was never found. Even if the name was intentionally forgotten, it had to remain in people's memory, to reflect somewhere in epics, legends, tales. There is only one memorial, the Selenga stone, that mentions Kipchaks.
Вот только единственный памятник — это вот Селенгийский камень, упоминающий о Кыпчаках.
In the west is the Sirdarya, in the east is the Irtysh, in the south is Semirechye, in the north is the Volga. The space between these four rivers was called Dashti Kipchak, where 92 Kipchak clans settled. Mashhur Jusip Kopeev. The Kipchaks, removing the collecting ethnonym Turk from the history arena, turned themselves into super-ethnos, the core of other Turkic tribes. In the 12th century, the Kipchaks transformed into a formidable force and thrilled the whole Arabic, Persian, Slavic, Roman Germanic world. In 1055, a wave of movement of new steppe tribes came rolling up to Rus borders. All of them were connected with the Kipchaks. But this general ethnopolitical term Kipchak didn't naturalize in the new places. In Rus, this term was translated into Slavic as yellow, polovi, and hence all newcomers were called polovtsi, and the steppe became known as Polovtsan steppe. Then they reached the Volga, Don, Dnieper, and Dniester. In 1071, the Kipchaks reached Asia Minor and conquered Anatolian town. Thereby, they laid the foundation of the Ottoman Turks. For 30 years, Kipchaks came to the Carpathians, the Danube, and the Balkan Mountains. Those who had gone beyond the Danube, the Hungarians called Kuns, but at the same time, their another name, Kumans, appeared. Polovtsi, Kipchaks, Kumans, is the Russian name of the Turkic nomadic people of Mongoloid origin who came from Trans-Volga region to the Black Sea steppes in the 11th century. Polovtsi's main occupation was nomadic cattle breeding. By the 12th century, they had handicraft specialities: blacksmith, hairdresser, shoemaker, saddle maker, fletcher, tailor. Polovtsi lived in yurts. In winter, they organized encampments on the banks of rivers. They believed in good and evil spirits. They erected monuments, stone statues to the dead. As Mahmud Kashgari stated, Kipchak, Aguzes, and other tribes that were part of that tribal union spoke remarkably pure Turkic language. Thus, it became a common language for all Turkic tribes that were part of Kipchak Union.
В тот период, действительно, кипчакский компонент, он уже начал распространяться по всей
In that period, indeed, Kipchak component already began to spread throughout the vast territory: Europe, Southwest Asia, Central Asia, and China. They all practically had a close relationship with Kipchak. There were dynastic marriages between Kipchaks and Russian princesses and Khwarezm Shahs. And the most important thing, Kipchaks became a major military and political force. There were no states which didn't have Kipchak guard or mercenaries. In the 11th century, Mahmud of Ghazni conquered India. His army practically consisted of Kipchaks. Kipchaks were Muhammad Khwarezm Shah's whole military elite, because they concluded dynastic marriages with Kipchak ruling clan El-Barils. It was the superpower in Central Asia at that time. If they all literally hired and collected, they depended on Kipchak warriors, Kipchak elite.
Если все буквально нанимают и собирают, зависят от кипчакских воинов, от кипчакской элиты.
By the end of the 5th century, Kipchaks settled in half of Europe and the whole Central Asia. In Eurasia, Turkic speech drowned any other. Turks were the most powerful and the largest people in the world. East and West culture met in the Idel Volga. Due to Kipchak's efforts, the ancient world united in a common space, which was called Eurasia. Murat Adji.
В литературе сегодня встречаются утверждения.
In the literature, there are statements that the Kipchaks were a backbone of the future Kazakh ethnos, Proto-Kazakh. However, academician Kazibayev believes that this conception is not deep enough. He is of the opinion that Kipchak people formed in the 11th, 12th centuries. According to the author, the basis for this can be a single settlement area, Turkic tribes developing together, a common language, formed nomadic and semi-nomadic way of life, a common cultural and spiritual relationship to the world, military democracy, common military operations. All this generated a common worldview and basic features of the people. According to historical sources, the names Kipchak and Kazakh emerged at the same time. It is believed by some authors. Well, it is quite possible, especially now, when Kazakhstan is celebrating the 25th anniversary of its independence.
Когда мы все отмечаем 25-летие независимости нашей страны.